I'm your MC for the evening, Elizabeth Newbury. Welcome, welcome. Now this is a 30-minute time slot, so I'm encouraging, nay, blatantly saying, if you have questions for us, we will not probably have time to get to them at the end, so please refer all questions to this thing called the internet, or Twitters, hashtag FGG, or you can just inundate me, I'm enoob, on the Twitterverse. So this is Agencies of Play, Science Games in the Government, and also quasi-government agencies, as a couple of us identify as that. So the goals for this particular meeting. One, we want to identify various ways that federal entities are orienting towards science education games. We have a couple of different mixed practices represented on this panel, and we're going to go through a couple of them. The other crazy thing that we want to do is give you resources, so go beyond this room, be it in the form of a game or in the form of a funding opportunity or funding opportunities for games and STEM education. All the members on this panel are part of what we call the Federal Games Guild, and it's not a LAN party, although we would love it to be that. It's an informal community of practice of federal agencies and quasi-federal agencies who are interested in games. We come at this from a variety of different perspectives depending on our individual federal agency goals. So for example, some of us use it for outreach mechanisms, use games as part of our ways of communicating with the general public. Some of us research games. Why do these crazy people play games? How can we use this for the greater good? And then a lot of us also orient towards that in the funding and supporting of the actual games ecosystem. And Dave will be talking a little bit more about that. Oh, I should point out, if you want more information about FGG and federal games, there's also a PDF of opportunities for funding at the bottom of this page. I will pause a moment for you to take a picture of this screen, and you can go to that URL. Seeing the cameras going that. Good. Okay. So the case examples from this panel on how different federal entities orient towards games, and specifically STEM games, are represented by myself. I'm from the Wilson Center, which is a federal think tank, and largely we view and use games as part of our STEM plus policy, education, and outreach. Then we have Reuben and Ryan here from the Smithsonian Science Education Center, and they use games as part of their public outreach around STEM education, which they'll talk about more. And then we have Dave Miller here from the NIH, who's going to be talking about how he wants to fund the next great game. These represent some of the mixed practices of the Federal Games Guild. So the Wilson Center, where I represent, is a federal think tank. Instead of making a statue for pigeons to land on, we decided to make a public memorial for Woodrow Wilson, our only president with a PhD and known for his international policy. So we're an international policy think tank. We're based right in DC, as are all of us, and part of our mission goal is to connect those who are doing research and those who are thinking great thoughts with those who are having to do it in public policy, so having to actually enact the public policy and create the laws. We have a serious games initiative. This falls under our Science and Technology Innovation Program at the Wilson Center, which is a program that looks at international policy around science and technology. And I'm the person there who is the director of the Serious Games Initiative, and part of my job is to play games, as we all do here at Games for Change. But I also have a PhD in communication from Cornell University, and my background is in game studies and game studies research. Part of our mission as part of this initiative is to communicate key policy issues and key issues around public policy discourse to the greater good around increasing education and understanding of those particular policies. You might have heard of the game Budget Hero, which is a game about the federal budget. It's one of the first games that the Serious Games Initiative at the Wilson Center created. And its latest rendition is the Fiscal Ship, which is about the federal budget policies. And we're nonpartisan, so you pick your own goals as part of this outreach, and it's also designed for civics classrooms, middle school and up. But we have also a large number of people who play this game who are 35 years or older, adults, as we would call them. And part of the whole idea is to make something as potentially unexciting and boring as the federal budget something that you might actually want to engage with. I could present you a 25-page book on the federal budget, or I could let you play a game, and generally well, I'm also talking to a biased audience, but a lot of people would generally want to play a game. And you can play this game in 15 minutes or less, and it's designed for a wide variety of audiences. Recently, though, we've been also using a lot of game development in more workshop material or internal training programs. And this is actually a very common theme in a lot of federal entities, where even though you may not see it, we're using games as part of our mission goals to train either staff members internally or also in closed workshops that aren't necessarily open to the public. So for example, I worked with a colleague in China to develop a series of serious games, live action role-playing games around water policy, community-based water policy. We worked with leading researchers on what sort of games, what sort of policies needed to be acted in this particular game, and we designed it for a Chinese audience and play tested it there. Other ways that we've oriented towards this is through prototype development, such as the board game rendition of Cards Against Calamity. You can see the digital version up in the marketplace produced by ELI. And this was originally conceived as a prototype developed at the Wilson Center with first playable NOAA Sea Grant funding and ELI. These are a couple of different ways that we're orienting towards this, and we also have a couple of prototypes in development around AI and environmental issues. So again, it's connecting these science concepts with policy through a game-based format, so people find it a little bit more accessible, a little bit more fun to engage with in a way that they wouldn't necessarily with a policy brief. That's how we orient towards games as a institution, and now I'm going to pass the mic over to my colleagues from the Smithsonian.
Hi everyone, my name is Reuben Brenner-Adams, and I'm here from the Smithsonian Science Education Center as an interactive developer. My colleague Ryan Seymour is here as an education technology specialist. And first what I want to do is introduce you to a little bit of what the Smithsonian Science Education Center is. So the Smithsonian Science Education Center, or SSEC, is a non-federal, quasi-governmental nonprofit, as Liz alluded to. That's what we are. And if you're confused about what that might mean, you are definitely not the only one, so come talk to me after this session. I don't need to go into that now, but what I do want you to know is that we are working to bring Smithsonian science to classrooms across the country and around the world. We're a formal educational organization. And one of the ways that we work to bring science to everyone is, Smithsonian science to everyone, is by our paid science curriculum, K-8 science curriculum, like Smithsonian Science for the Classroom, which you can see on the left-hand side of the slide. And we also have free science curriculum, Smithsonian Science for Global Goals, which is aligned with the UN Sustainable Development Goals. And you can see the first module of that focused on mosquito-borne disease on the right-hand side of the slide. The other way, and the way that's more applicable to what Ryan and I both do, is that we work to bring Smithsonian science to all, is through our digital products. And all of these are aligned with next generation science standards and other educational standards. And all of these are available for free online and on various mobile platforms. And these include games, apps, simulations, videos, and ebooks. And you can see an example of some of these up here. So one of the most recent projects that we've been working on is called Tammys Tower, Let's Think About Engineering. I have a little video that I'm going to play for you. So Tammys Tower, Let's Think About Engineering is an engineering design game for a young elementary audience focused on teaching the connections between simple geometric shapes and their physical functions. The player has to help Tammy, a golden lion tamarin monkey, reach the fruit on the branch overhead by building a tower for her to climb. As you saw, the player self-evaluates their performance through a metacognitive prompt, and then a heavy animal, such as an Asian elephant, runs across the screen and the tower has to stand up through the shaking of the ground after the animal runs across the screen. Tammys Tower was funded by an internal Smithsonian Institution Youth Access Grant, and our goal was to create an explorative engineering game for young learners because we noticed there was a lack of free resources in that market on that topic. As the Smithsonian Science Education Center, one of our primary goals, as I mentioned, is to make science accessible to everyone. And we found that one of the best ways to make science accessible to everyone is through free digital products. And in the past, we've contracted projects like this, but Tammys Tower is the first game that we've created entirely in-house with our small, agile digital media team working alongside science and engineering content experts. And we created Tammys Tower over a 6-month time span. And just wanted to go a little bit more into the development. Our initial brainstorming and paper prototyping centered on the idea of connecting simple geometric shapes to their physical function, and you can see an early digital prototype on the left there. Once we had a playable game, we conducted iterative user testing, both internally and externally with target audience groups and others, and we really knew that this was going to be a successful project when we saw kids interacting with it and getting really, really excited when their tower stood up after the shaking. And we found that kids were also really engaged with the animals, especially the panda. So based on this effort, we were able to release Tammys Tower for free on a number of platforms, including web, Apple, Google, and Amazon. And with that, I'm going to hand it over to Ryan.
So we wanted to create this game where it could be used for classroom use. So teachers would be able to use this game in a science classroom environment. That has a lot of challenges involved. And one of the first challenges that we were thinking through as a group was what kind of technical challenges might teachers face when they're trying to bring Tammys Tower into the classroom. And something that we heard a lot of is many schools don't have reliable internet access. And so in special cases, we've actually installed Tammys Tower on USB drives. And if schools need it or other educational institutions are requesting it, we can give them that USB drive with the game and all the other additional educational content, and they can install it onto their own hardware. It was a challenge that we were thinking through, and this seemed like the most cost-effective way to do that. Our goal was to get as many learners, a diverse group of learners, involved in this engineering class. And so we wanted to focus on accessibility issues, especially with visual impairment issues. We created a voiceover, a text alternative activity, and we also took the color scheme of this game and we tested it in color blindness testing. So we wanted to make sure that the contrast was right for color blindness visualization. And so we wanted to, and we also included some other activities in this process, but those were the main things that we wanted to include. And finally, we translated this product into Spanish, and that includes all the other accessibility content as well. And we wanted to, and including voiceover. So with the voiceover elements, we hired a voice actor for the English version, and then we hired a Spanish speaker for the Spanish version as well. And the voiceover was actually very helpful since this game is focused on early language learners and also with underserved populations like ESL students. The voiceover really helped them engage better with the product. We also designed a lesson plan booklet for teachers around this game. Now, as Reuben said, the game was based around NGSS standards. It's NGSS aligned, Next Generation Science Standards. And we also created a whole 45-minute lesson plan around it. It's focused around the 5 E's that is pretty common in the STEM classroom. So it's going to be the engage, explore, extend, engage, explore, explain, extend, evaluate format. And we were focusing on hands-on engineering activities. So with our worksheet, we had students play with shapes through cutting them out and building different structures and different ways to engage in that engineering iterative design process. And finally, we gave teachers a way to evaluate students' performance, and we have an evaluation rubric to see if students were engaging with the material correctly or if they were displaying misconceptions or things like that. And I'm going to, that finishes Tammys Tower, and I'm going to switch it over to Dave.
Hello, everyone.
It's a little bit like speed dating, sorry.
No, this is great. Whoops. So switching gears, and sorry for moving the camera here. My name is David Miller. I'm a program director at the National Cancer Institute, which is one of the 27 institutes and centers that make up the National Institutes of Health. We're one of the preeminent funders of biomedical health and biology-related research in the country. And in addition to funding tools and technologies and basic research, we can also fund your methodologies and games and interactive media that can impact health behavior or the sciences or health education or even impact health research itself. And for my talk here, I'm going to give a couple examples of these sorts of things and then give you, since we have limited time, some contact information on who you can reach out to if you're interested in potentially developing a game or bringing your expertise, your tools, your technologies to biomedical health research. So the first example I have here is a game funded by the National Cancer Institute, which is the institute I am at. Called Cancer Crusade. A key part of this is the partnership that developed. So both examples, I'm going to talk about the partnership. This was a partnership between Sandy Anderson at the Moffitt Cancer Center and then David Ettery and his team at SpryFox. They met at a think tank that we held a number of years ago. And in conversations, they realized that the type of research that the Sandy Anderson's group at Moffitt is working on, called adaptive therapy, could have some game components to it. Essentially, Sandy Anderson's group develops tools and technologies, models and algorithms for determining optimal treatment strategies for patients with sort of late-stage cancer. The goal is to come up with various combination therapies and sequence of therapies, but this is a very, very large search space. The search algorithms that they have are sort of evolutionarily informed, and you can read about that in a very digestible Wired piece from a couple months ago. But using the creativity and sort of insight of the general public, they turned this into a mobile game in which you can yourself explore various treatment strategies, essentially role-playing as an oncologist, trying out various sequences and combinations of these treatment strategies to eliminate a tumor, as you see here. So for this particular one, a combination of chemo and a sort of oxygen deprivation treatment can lead to success in eliminating that tumor, or at least keeping the tumor burden as low as possible. Switching gears a bit to another very large collaboration between folks at the Yale Center for Health and Learning Games and the Play to Prevent lab that they have there, along with folks at Shell Games, First Playable, Digital Mill, and as well as various components of the NIH, FDA, and HHS full-on, are this sequence of games, Play Forward, Elm City Stories, and Smokescreen. Now, you may have heard Kimberly Hefia's talk earlier today about the virtual reality version of Smokescreen and the recent name change, but that tool is built on a couple of previous NIH-funded grants that developed their early technology that has led to the current VR game that they have. So in addition to the excellent partnership and very diversified multidisciplinary team that they've built together, the outcomes were twofold. Both obviously the behavioral modification games in teaching teens and preteens and adolescents on improving their sexual choice behaviors that they make, as well as choices surrounding juuling and nicotine use behaviors, but also the computational and science research that comes out of this comes out in various forms of publications that you see here. So while the NIH is, of course, wanting to fund the next great game, we're also wanting to fund the next great research project as well. So because of that, you very often will see these types of collaborations between a game developer, UX designer, domain science expertise, and then the sort of computational folks that may develop the sort of scientific underpinnings of the tool that you have. So I have to say that not just in game development, but broadly across the NIH, highly collaborative projects like this are the norm no matter what particular area you're in. So folks are increasingly, especially on the biology side, are increasingly getting used to interacting with folks outside of their typical realms and silos of expertise. So I would encourage you all, if you're thinking of, oh, maybe there's some health outcome or something that I could have an impact on, to begin to reach out to folks relative to that particular area that you're interested in having an impact in using your game development skills. For this last slide, obviously NIH is a very, very large place, and we don't have time to talk about the ins and outs of that here. So I'll just leave you with the contact information for me at the National Cancer Institute, as well as a colleague of mine, Tony Beck, who focuses on the education side of these games. So you're welcome to take a photo of this. We'll leave it up for a bit here. And I have a bit of time here to hand out some cards and talk to you afterward as well. In addition, if you're going to another talk that I'm having later on upstairs in about a half hour on the second floor, I'll be going more into details about some strategies on how to interact with various NIH program directors. If you can't get into that talk, though, by all means, reach out, and I'm always happy to have interactions with you. It is very unlikely that I'm the person you'll end up talking to, since I focus on cancer research. However, via our network through the Federal Games Guild and through other contacts within the NIH, it's usually just one or two handshakes in order to get you to folks that would be relevant to your particular areas.
Great. And this is another resource slide that we wanted to make available to you. One side, all of our contact information, including our social media handles. I promise I don't post too much about what I'm eating or anything along those lines on the social media. I can't promise no cute pictures of my dog, though, because he's just so adorable. On the other side, we have resources, including the Federal Games Guild link, Cards Against Calamity board game. If you want a board game version as opposed to the digital version, First Playable is the producer for both of those. Tammys Tower, both in English and Spanish, and then the NIH grants links at the bottom. And I think we have time for one or two very quick questions. We have about 5 minutes, so one or two questions for anyone on the panel.
Yeah.
Yes.
This question, well, it could be for anybody, but when you're looking for outside collaborators, what are you looking for? What makes for the perfect partnership?
How much you have, for the NIH perspective, it's how you have the maximum impact on the area that you're looking at, right? So it's not just that you have an interesting project that you want to put together and a significant disease or organ site or problem that you're trying to tackle, but really that you've brought together the right expertise to tackle that. Right? So if you're working on say a cancer problem and you're interacting with a psychiatrist who is maybe not specific to dealing with patients who are specifically focused on cancer, you might want to reconsider the expertise that you have on your team or add someone else, that sort of thing. If your question is how do you reach out and meet those folks, a couple of different ways. You can meet them here at conferences like this, and then very oftentimes if you just reach out to, if you're in an academic setting or you're near some hospitals or universities, go to talks, go to public interaction, things that they have there, and strike up a conversation, and you'd be surprised how quickly they know someone who knows someone who's working on that very, very area that would be relevant to you.
Yes.
The material shown looks like it was for juvenile children audience. Do the agencies also have an interest in adult learning and adult education, and also do they have an interest in non-academic educational applications?
Can you explain a little bit more what you mean by non-academic applications?
Well, we're working on health education in particular that would be direct to consumer and delivered in a clinical setting or at home versus in a school setting or
So like informal learning areas?
I'm sorry?
Informal learning spaces, not the classroom learning spaces?
Correct.
So yes, there's definitely interest. It really depends across which agencies. I know that you have been working a little bit more deeply on informal learning opportunities.
Yeah, so our primary application of our games is in classrooms, but they're also all good as standalone experiences, and they work in informal settings as well. But most of our curriculum is focused on K through 12 education, and so that's where most of our games have focused so far. But we're interested in exploring other spaces as well.
And I can say, insofar as the adult audiences perspective, the Wilson Center's history has mostly been for adult audiences with our games around Budget Hero and Fiscal Ship. I've played it we wanted to make it accessible for middle school and up, but I've played it with middle school audiences, collegiate audiences, as well as congressional staff off the Hill. So I think there's definitely more of an interest across agencies, especially for training opportunities and that sort of thing, targeting a wide diversity of audiences. It's a good question, though. Thank you. I saw another hand over here, and this is going to probably be the last question we get to.
I just have a good question for Dave, specifically for NIH. Are you are collaborating on projects, or is it you want business game companies to come to you with projects kind of already within the realm that you're working?
So the bulk of what the NIH funds, and that's an excellent question, so I couldn't get to it. The bulk of what the NIH funds is what's called investigator-initiated research, meaning you're not looking for an RFP or a funding opportunity that specifically calls out the exact thing that you're already developing. It's really 60-70% of what we fund is you as investigators form your teams together, come up with the best project you can and the best pitch for it, your 12-page write-up that you have, and submit that, because that's, we as program directors at the NIH, we can sort of see to the horizon and can kind of see what's coming, but you as investigators, as researchers, as game developers, you know what's over the horizon. So we're sort of really not in much position to tell you what to be developing. So the shorter answer is whether you are an academic or an individual or you have a company, there are small business innovation research projects that you can develop, or you can send in for standard grants as well, whether it's something that you have completely developed on your own and you've already got your company formed, or if it's something that is sort of already along the path and you want to have continued development or sustainability built into the thing that you're developing. I'm happy to talk to you more too.
And unfortunately, that's all we have time for at the moment, but our offices are located just outside the door into the hallway. Not really, but and we really appreciate all of your time. Thank you so much for joining us.